All right, welcome back to the MSD podcast. So excited to be here today. I'm Nick Davis, the host today, and we have a very special guest with us today. We have Patrick Fernbach. Patrick, welcome.
Thanks, Nick. Glad to be here.
So currently, right now, Patrick, you're Director of Mechanical Engineering for KLH.
Yep, Director of Mechanical Engineering. That's right.
But today we get to dive into something a little bit different, right? We get to talk about where your world started, right? As you started your career, that was, if I have the story right, it was Red Lobster.
Yeah, it was the first real tax-paying job that was actually before college. That would have been during high school. Yep.
Excellent, excellent. So, there's so many things we're gonna dive into today, and the thing that we really wanted to hit on today was I mean, obviously Red Lobster, right? But the other thing is to really kind of look at it from how we develop and manage relationships, right? From different perspectives, different angles, and it's gonna be a fun conversation today, I think.
Yeah, it's funny. I'm sure there's going to be KLHers listening to this. I use Red Lobster analogies all the time when I train our people and grow young engineers in the industry. And so, yeah, I'm really excited for this podcast and just sharing lessons learned and doing a deep dive in relationships. It'll be good.
Red Lobster, the founder, he was 19 years old, right, when he first came out with Red Lobster in 1974. So you're talking decades and decades of Red Lobsterness, right, out there. Is that a thing, Red Lobsterness? Is that a thing?
I've never said it, but I'm sure you can make it a thing.
Yeah, I'm sure Claudia said it once or twice, right?
Yeah.
You gotta go for the mascot, Claudia. So as you start, and yeah, it's so awesome. Everybody starts somewhere, right? And that really hit home when you said you go back and you talk and you reminisce about what you learned in that role. What was kind of your role and what'd you do for Red Lobster?
Yeah, so I started out, like I said, in high school, and my whole family's kind of worked there at some point in their life. My mom worked there at the time. I started out as a busser, so I was just bussing tables, and right out of the gate, high school, shy. I mean, I don't think I said 2 words the first 4 months I worked there. From there, I just started, hosting, being a hostess or whatever you want to call that position, seating people, moved over to carry out. When I turned 18, I could work in the kitchen, so I went from the fry person to the broiler, worked my way up, the dishwasher to the grill master, and then when I turned 19, I could legally wait tables, and then when I turned 21, I could bartend. So it kind of took me through like the tail end of high school, and then most of the way all the way through college.
Wow, so talk about career progression, right? High school, college, like how many years total were you a Red Lobster guy?
I worked there for I think it was 7.5 years.
7.5 years.
So it was a big chunk of my life.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow. That's really cool too. Like it doesn't matter, like everybody starts somewhere and like seeing the progression of the many different roles and the different hats, right? And obviously trust was established, right? Internally. People trusted you. What did that feel when you got the opportunity to do something else? Not just because you turned 18, but because you gained their trust.
Yeah, I love that question because when I started out as a busser and they made me a host, there actually wasn't a whole lot of trust there. And they actually took a chance on me because I was the quiet busser that didn't talk to people, right? And they just kind of took a chance on me. It was like a Friday night, and I started hosting and seating people. And the whole thing was like when you seat people, you're supposed to talk to them on their way back to their table. I don't know if you've ever had that experience where you get somebody, they pick up menus and they dart to the table, and you're like, hold on. So I was always trying to make an effort to turn around, hey, how you doing? What are you here for tonight? I'd sit there, I'd let them sit down first. I'd sit their menus down in front of them. Your server will be right with you and walk away. And it was like little things like that. Like I felt really robotic, but they were like, oh, he's going to do great, right? But that was the most I'd probably ever talked after being there for 4 months. And to your point about trust, that established like, okay, we can kind of take a chance and give him opportunities to show up, and maybe he does good in other positions. So that kind of played out through that time. And by the way, being a server is where the money's at. So it was kind of one of those things where you want to get to that role. For me, it was a waiting game, but establishing myself to show up and do a good job and serve people that were coming in the door allowed me, at the end of the day, they were just like, oh, you're 19? Let's make you a server immediately.
I love that so much because you come in and you start gaining the trust of the team members around.
Yeah.
And, you mentioned being shy, which it's tough for me to imagine that, right?
Yeah.
Because I see you in a different role and we're constantly, you're working with our team here, MSD, shout out to Sarah Sowers, Ben Ambos, Austin Free out there, the KLH team works really, really close with our engineering department and the MSD team members, and you're everything but shy, right? You're constantly innovative, thinking outside the box, and I think that really spells out your growth as far as like becoming secure in who you were as a person, right?
Yeah.
And being able to be comfortable speaking more.
Yeah, I love what you're saying. Everybody starts somewhere, and honestly, for me, when I interview people now, I'm looking for work experience, and it doesn't really matter if it's from an engineering background. I just want to know that even like volunteer experience. Do you have experience interacting with other people, right, and serving other people, and what does that look like? Do you know how to build relationships? Do you know how to communicate? And for me, early in high school, I didn't know a lot of that, right? I mean, for me at least, I was sheltered at home, and I'm from a small rural community, so there's not a whole lot of like hustle and bustle going on other than like some cornfields here and there, right? So it's like getting out in the world, experiencing that, to your point, it makes you more comfortable in your own skin.
And for you, I mean, you started at Red Lobster just like Chris Rock and Anna Nicole Smith. They also started at Red
Did
Lobster.
they?
They did. Chris Rock, he mentions it again at one of his Comedy Centrals, and he talked about being the guy behind the scenes, right? So he was one of the ones that were, I assume, prepping the food. So
I bet he gets a lot of content from that.
I mean, shout out. I mean, Red Lobster is just a fantastic restaurant. It has a great family feel. I'm also excited. We're getting ready to take a family vacation to Bar Harbor, Maine's like the final destination before we start to work ourselves back. And reading on Red Lobster a little bit, it has an image, and it says, it's based on Bar Harbor, Maine, and it's pretty cool when you look at that picture and you see, the harbor and the sailboats, and just sets a really good vibe as far as welcoming in families and giving people a chance or an environment to really kind of communicate and collaborate and just spend some time as a family.
Yeah.
So you mentioned, stepping into the server role, right? And obviously now you're getting to engage with people. What was some of the training that you had to partake in at Red Lobster before you were able to start having this working in the server role?
Yeah, so it's interesting. I think I was actually like the youngest like certified trainer. So there was a whole like certified trainer process that they went through. In order for you to train somebody, you had to become certified. You actually had to like go to another Red Lobster. They like flew people in. They trained you on how to train people, right? So I went through that. I received that training from busser all the way through, right? Every position you went through, you got some type of training. I'll never forget. They actually like the core values are still ingrained in my brain. Right, and it actually spells an acronym RIGHT, which is respect, integrity, genuine caring, hospitality, and teamwork. And that was always
say that one more time really slow.
Respect, integrity, genuine caring, hospitality, teamwork.
Love it.
And those were pushed down through the training regiment. So it was kind of interesting. Even like managers were like, hey, that's not our core values. Our core values respect. When I got trained at a host, right, it was like, hey, open the door. That's called hospitality. Right, and when we showed up as a server, we were constantly trying to make the experience the best we could. One of my, strongest managers, I remember, you call people customers, right? He said, we don't use that word here. That's a bad word. We call them guests. They're spending their time with us, and we want to make sure they make the most of it. People come here to celebrate birthdays, anniversaries, and we want to make that. We want Red Lobster to be a part of that experience with their families, to your point, right? So that was always the mindset, growing through as a busser and a host, constantly getting ingrained. It's like, okay, this is more than just burn and churn tables, right? We want this to be an experience. And Red Lobster, let's not be coy about it. I mean, it's not the lowest price pointed restaurant in the whole,
Well, they have the rotating 8 catch of the day, right? So you
Yeah.
always pick the catch of the day. They rotate 8 different catches, right? Which is a rotating menu, which is just absolutely fantastic. I mean,
Yeah.
talk about filling your appetite, right?
Yeah, for a chain restaurant, I mean, absolutely. I mean, they're trying to inject creativity in that experience, right?
Yeah, I can really see. I I can still feel the passion that you had going back, and like, and it's funny listening to you talk because I see that same thing today. So as you were kind of going from the shy host to working in the server role, and you started to really engage with different audiences, right? What were some of the experiences that you learned with how to approach a table and being able to read the room or reading audience, and kind of elaborate on that and then go right into kind of how that carries over to your role as a director of mechanical engineering for KLH today?
Yeah, no, that's a great question, because when you approach a table, I mean, there's this immediate, like, you gotta read the room, right? And there's some, guests that they kinda just want you to leave them alone. And there's other guests that, and you're probably like this, you were just sharing this with me, when you walk in somewhere, you're like trying to build a relationship with the person who's, making your food or your meal or whatever. And you have those individuals, right? And you kinda have to meet them where they want you to, because that's part of the experience, right? In a weird way, you're almost like an actor. And you're just trying to play a role, but at the same time, you're trying to be genuine, right? And I've shared things personally and built relationships and got regulars, and they kept coming back. I mean, I actually had one family that used to go to carryout. When I became a server, they started coming in and eating, right? And then when their kids that were older came in town, and they were all in town, they brought their whole family to Red Lobster.
Wow.
Just to see
They
me,
had to
right?
make you feel extremely special, right?
Yeah, and that's the depth of the relationships, and like how that translates to KLH. I mean, you're spot on. Every room that we walk in as individuals, we're constantly looking at, all right, what's the vibe, right? What's the tone, and how do I show up? I think as humans, we're always trying to figure out where I fit in any, social, which most of our interactions are social. We're social beings. So you're always trying to like measure yourself up and just observe, especially if you have established relationships and you're walking in new. The other thing is, I actually had this scenario pop up not too long ago where I just simply asked a question, how are you doing today? I had a team member at KLH, and they're like, oh, I'm doing okay. And I was like, well, what can I do to make okay into good? Like, what's going on? You good? Is there something I can do? And they were just like floored, right? Like, I'm not used to somebody actually just like, usually they just move through the conversation and be polite, right? But I'm like, I'm gonna take a pause, right? You're a person, I'm reading the room, and I know enough about reading a room in a situation. By the way, that was a Teams call, right? So like, there's a lot of things you can pick up just on like facial expressions, and just ask an extra question, right? And sometimes people will go there and they need you to, and sometimes they won't, right? And it's constantly just monitoring where you are and what's going on, listening more than talking sometimes.
I think that you're spot on there. Everyone's coming from a different angle. Everybody in life is going through something, right? But the human mind tends to, in this day and age in our culture, we tend to go negative first. And it's really, it really hit home there when you're talking about treat people like a guest, create that experience, right? Give them time, like just reaching out. How you doing today? Just okay. Well, that's how it carried over to today's world, right? Like, well, why are you just okay? And really truly being genuine and caring about what can you do? What can we do to make people's day just a little better, right? We all get in the hustle bustle of life, right? But just pausing and that's tough for me too, because I'm full speed energy, and taking a deep breath. I mean, that really helps me too, just to take a deep breath, pause, and make sure that you're living in the moment, right? Because you can, the past is the past, the future is the future, but are we living in present time? Are we making sure that we're treating people like a guest? Are we creating that awesome experience?
Yeah, and maybe to kind of build on that a little bit, because there's just so many specific scenarios. We could probably sit here all afternoon, but like you would have people come in as a guest and they wouldn't share things, but it would make special requests, and I would be working with servers and be like, oh, why do they want, gosh, that's so hard on the kitchen. And coming from a person that worked in the kitchen, they would also be like, gosh, that's a special order. We got to make it with no salt, no pepper. I'll never forget one lady actually had it was like cancer in her abdomen, and she was ordering like tilapia, which is the blandest of fish, no seasoning, and mashed potatoes. And I just showed up, served her really well, and after serving her every Sunday for 3 Sundays, she's like, I really appreciate you, because I went back in the kitchen and actually made it myself, because I was like, I want to make sure this is right. That's service, right? Nobody asked me to do that. I just showed up and did it. And she actually shared oh, this is great, because the other thing, she couldn't have any bird corners or edges. So I made sure it was put in the oven right, so it came out, it was done, but there was like no char on it, right? Because that was hard on what she was going through. And she's like, I'm actually dealing with this, and this is why I come here every Sunday.
Wow.
So it's like, to your point, there's deep things that people are dealing with. They're making requests for things, and we can immediately react as like, oh my gosh, they're extra, right? But not understanding, oh, they're actually dealing with something, and I just like impacted their entire week by serving them a piece of fish, right? Now you play that out as an engineer. I mean, we're stewards of owners' money and their assets and their buildings, right? Like, every owner's trying to accomplish something or accomplish some goal or impact the community. And like, it is on us as a construction industry to make sure that we're putting that owner in the best position to ultimately accomplish their goals.
Yeah, I love what you said there. I mean, create that experience, everybody's going through something, but really catering to the needs of that guest, that client experience, right? At the end of the day, that's what feeds all of us, right? And we want to make sure that we support and listen to people's needs to assure that their expectations are met. That's some very, very powerful stuff, you know? And, you know, it takes, you know, like the fifth core value you mentioned there with Red Lobster, it takes teamwork. So there's many different roles that support the relationship, right? And having the trust there, you know, that can be pretty awesome. So, you know, all the different roles and responsibilities that you saw at your time at Red Lobster, how's that kind of carried over to your role today and realizing the importance of, you know, trusting your teammates and your team members to assure that client's experience, that guest experience is above par?
Yeah, great question. I actually went through this with our company. So we do Great Game of Business every Friday, and at the beginning of the huddle, I just kind of shared like these two scenarios, because we always talk about sales, right? What does sales mean, right? It's nothing more than building trust, building relationships. And I actually used the restaurant analogy to like build on that, right? And I kind of played it out. I'll give the CliffsNote version. By the way, I think this is why you and I get along so well, because we're both talkers. For sure.
Oh boy.
But basically, there's two scenarios, right? There's like scenario one, great server, right? You get this best service, but the downside of scenario one is you walk in, there's no host at the front desk, so you're waiting. You're seeing servers walk by. They don't say hi. They don't acknowledge you. You sit there and wait for 5 minutes. Then you get sat. Crumbs on the seat, dirty table. They have to re-wipe it, right? You leave and nobody says goodbye or says anything. Are you coming back? You know, by the way, the food came out, it was cold, right? It wasn't right. It wasn't how you ordered it, all these things. Great server though. Server was great. You loved the server. The whole room was like, I'm not going back. Second scenario, you walk up, host is opening the door for you. Hi, how are you doing today? Oh, Nick, glad to see you, man.
Wow, know my name too, feel
know your
special.
name, right?
Yep.
You walk in, immediately walk you straight back to a table. Server comes up, great service, clean table. You don't even notice it, right? Because those are things you shouldn't have to notice. Just a phenomenal service all the way through. Are you coming back? And everybody in the room at KLH was like, yeah, I'm coming back. It's like, okay, to your point about roles, right? When we correlate that, like the host had to show up, the busser had to show up, the person cooking the food had to show up, the server had to show up. Everybody's got a role,
Catch the
right?
day had to be there.
Catch the
Fisherman
day had to be there,
part,
yeah.
right?
So the manager had to order the right,
Yeah.
material. But when we look at like construction, I mean, even our engineers, our designers, they've got to show up. You know, they might not be in front of the client all the time, but it takes a team effort. And everything that comes together at the end of the day is because we all showed up and we did our part, and we try to do it as best as we could. So.
Yeah, and it's like, you know, take nothing for granted in life. We always say, you know, we joke about 86,400 seconds in a day and living in the moment, right? And taking nothing for granted. And I love what you just said there, because it doesn't matter what your role is in any organization. Every organization needs every role working to maximize productivity and creating an amazing experience. And that's what allows these organizations, these businesses to continue to thrive. And those that have that figured out, like the Red Lobsters of the world, the KLHs, you know, the MSDs, there's so many great companies in our industry that do that time and time again. And at the end of the day, what do we need? We need everyone to deliver a great experience. That's something we just can't take for granted. And you hit on all that. Now, same thing, right? Let's talk about teamwork and what do you do when it comes to owning up to mistakes? So let's start with a scenario at Red Lobster, right? So you're like, man, you knew you made a mistake, but you learned, right? And you were able to carry that over. And then same thing on the engineering standpoint, right? I mean, there's many different obstacles that we have to navigate through, and everyone makes mistakes, right? But how did you learn that as a young guy coming up with your first job, and how do you relate that to today's world?
Yeah, great question. The food service industry, as you know, can be contentious at times, right? I mean, people are hungry, and when you don't feed them, they're usually not too patient, right? And I'll never forget, there was a table I was serving. It was like kind of like later that evening, next to the kitchen, and the husband ordered a rock lobster tail, which is like the most high dollar plate of the whole thing. And I think the wife actually ordered like a surf and turf or something like that. So the food comes out, right? And wife's plate comes out, surf and turf, hits the table fine. The husband plate comes out, and it's walled shrimp, which is like a fried shrimp platter, right? It's like 12 fried shrimp. I mean, it's not a rock lobster tail, let's face it. And I remember like seeing it, and I'm like, oh gosh. And I didn't walk the food to the table, somebody else did. And he didn't say anything, but I walked like right by as soon as it hit the table, and I was like, walked back there and immediately thought that they just like flipped the plate out or something weird happened. And they didn't. I looked up at the screen, it was like walled shrimp, surf and turf, and I was like, oh gosh. So I went back, and the walled shrimp button was right next to the rock lobster tail button, right? So everybody could just say, well, the kitchen screwed this up, right? I'm gonna save my butt as a server and make sure I get paid. I walked up to the table, and he asked me straight up, how did this happen? What's going on? And I looked at him, and I was like, the button for walled shrimp is right next to the rock lobster tail button. I gummed it up, fat fingered it, and I pressed the wrong button and didn't even realize it. That's on me. And like we got the rock lobster tail expedited, got to hit the table. He left me like a $40 or $50 tip or something ridiculous on like I think their end check was like $20,
yeah,
right?
He
shook my
brutally honest.
hand and said, "Look, that takes a lot. You owned
Wow,
up
that's
to your
powerful.
mistake." So to your point, like I was like, wow, like that was, if there's that lesson sunk in right then and there, like if you just own your stuff, it's going to be hard to own it. But at the end of the day, people respect that, right? I know I do when people do that for me. I mean, on the engineering side, construction side, construction's messy. It can be, there's a lot going on, there's a lot of different disciplines and coordination. It's the same thought process, right? It show up like, yeah, that's not right. It's usually, I mean, what we say at KLH, run to the fire. One of our core values is actually own it, which is literally like when something happens, just own it and solve the problem, right? And if it's on us, it's on us at the end of the day. And if it's not, and it's on somebody else, like it doesn't matter because we ran to the fire and we solved the problem, and that's going to help the owner no matter what, right? So we've had a lot of scenarios where we just run to the fire and show up and solve the problem, and nobody asks for additional monies or whatever. They're just like, hey, that's all I wanted, right? I just wanted you to get this problem solved. I've got contingency in the job. I just didn't have an extra month to deal with the problem sitting there, right? So it's the same thought process that I see show up in construction, engineering, even like internally. Like you make mistakes. We're a very innovative company, right? And we've gone down roads and written code and programs that didn't work, and it's like, okay, that didn't work. What did we learn from it? What did we take from it? Share that with the company. Hey, don't do this again, right? And you move on, learn from it, and press forward.
Yeah, I love that so much because a lot of times realizing the lessons learned, right? Pulling away with the lesson learned from what at that time was a mistake or an error, no matter your industry, what we learned from that sometimes creates some of the best outcomes long term, because having that humbleness and that genuine care for wanting consistent improvement and raising that bar and utilizing that out of the box thinking, right? That every organization needs people thriving, right? Because the thing that really hits home is no business stays the same.
Yeah.
Nobody is going to just stay the same. Businesses are either dying or they're growing. There's no like, well, we did that yesterday, let's do the same thing today. Do the same thing, because people get sick of the same thing, right? And that bar of expectations has to consistently be raised. And hearing that, those two scenarios there, I think it does a really good job of just showcasing that. And like, the thing I want is for everybody to find their comfort and realize everybody comes with different levels of expertise, but taking that radical ownership, right? And thinking outside the box, because every single person has brilliant thoughts that we want them to share, collaborate, right? And I love those two scenarios because it just spells that out perfectly.
Yeah, it folds back into the rules conversation we were just having, right? Like, own it, and then also like, don't be afraid to have hard conversations, right? It's kind of like a two-pronged lesson there, because I've had a lot of people like, hey, I'm doing this thing, and I don't really enjoy it. I'd rather do this. It's like, all right, let's build a plan to get you there,
Yeah.
right? And it's all about, to your point, getting people on the right seat of the bus, right? And making sure that, they're having fun, and enjoying their work, and they can build a career wherever they're working at. I think most companies want that, right? I mean, for me, I don't like a lot of turnover, right? I build relationships with people, and I like to at least think of myself as somebody that truly cares about everybody that I come in contact with. And I think MSD is the same way. I mean, I've seen that firsthand. I mean, everybody I interact with, the PMs, the foremen, like, they genuinely care about doing a good job and showing up. And they're just after the same thing, right? I'm here to build a career, and, I just want to play my role, and, and I've got innovative, cool, different thoughts that, to be honest, I don't think about, because I don't hang duct work.
Mm-hmm.
You don't want me hanging duct, man. It'd be the worst install job you ever had.
Well, I think for companies to thrive, you have to really do what you just said there. You have to rely on other people with expertise, right?
Yeah.
It's the same thing with, you look at Red Lobster, there was a store manager, right? Well, that store manager, if they wanted to improve the process of different areas, who's better to talk to than those people that are actually currently working in those roles,
Yeah.
right? And then you talk about bringing all these roles together and creating the power of teamwork. It's pretty awesome, right? When you think about what's possible by connecting and giving people a chance to really kind of share their thoughts, and then bringing that to the concept of the team. Pretty awesome.
Yeah.
Pretty awesome. Everyone starts somewhere, and this has been just an awesome conversation. We discussed so much, right? All the way back to where when we talked about, everybody has something that they're dealing with, and giving people the time to really, just how you doing, and seeing what we can do as individuals to make sure we create a positive environment. I thought that was just awesome. Not to mention, right, we talked about treating people like a guest, right? So whether you're at Red Lobster or at KLH, it's about really making sure we create an amazing experience for those people, right? By listening. We talked about all the different roles that all these different organizations have, and how it takes, truly a team, right, to consistently deliver those expectations, assuring that we're constantly raising the bar and thinking outside the box and listening to the people that are in those roles. I mean, there's a lot that we've chewed on here today. We talked about owning up to mistakes, right? That allows creativity to flow and lessons learned. Super awesome. And Patrick, you're an incredible partner of MSD, and we can't thank you enough for what you do on a daily basis. For KLH, for the overall industry. You're a rising superstar in my mind, and I know our team loves having the opportunity to be able to work with you. So, any closing thoughts for the group today?
No, I think you summed it up nice, Nick. I mean, live in the present, and I'll echo. I mean, I think the KLH MSD partnership has been great. It's been awesome to build relationships, not just with you, with your PMs, with your foremen, a lot of people in the field, the journeymen, everybody coming up through the ranks, Sarah and Austin on the engineering side. So it's been awesome. I'll echo that. I think, live in the moment, take a breath, and know everybody's dealing with something, right? And it's all about the experience, whether that's in a restaurant or the experience of life. You can take that as big or small as you want to. So
make the most of the 86,400 seconds in a day.
I love it.
Choose to be positive. Choose to be innovative. Think outside the box. Embrace the power of team.
Yeah.
Appreciate it, brother.
Love it.
Thanks, Patrick.
Yeah, anytime. Thanks for having me.